Well, we're here with Siegfried Schmitt. He is a vice president in Parexel Consulting, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me. So, I would like to just briefly introduce my career in the industry. So, I've been in this pharmaceutical industry for over 35 years now. And I had roles in manufacturing and quality assurance. I worked for several companies that provide consulting services. And this month, I actually reached 18 years with Parexel, and where I provide strategic consulting services to our clients. Now, I find this role particularly interesting because we span the whole life cycle from the clinic to market access to post-marketing, from engineering to operations, quality and regulatory affairs. So part of my role is actually to perform audits all over the world. And the companies audited range from clinical sites and sponsor sites to manufacturing and distribution.
Oh, sounds like a hell of an experience. So, one of the things that your company is doing is hybrid audits. Could you explain to the audience, can you clearly define what a hybrid audit is and why the industry is shifting or has shifted to this model?
Right, yeah. I think best to start with what a classical audit is, namely an audit in person on site. And audits are part of the due diligence exercise, i.e., you want to ascertain whether a company is suitable and capable of performing the job, and to do it in a compliant manner. Now, the COVID pandemic was the main trigger for industry and the regulatory agencies to review how to perform audits and to perform audits in a remote manner. So, remote meaning via video link, really.
Yeah.
However, it is really difficult to review documentation or to observe actual working practices via video link.
Mhm.
And therefore, the hybrid model, where at least for some of the time a person would be present on site, was developed. And so a hybrid audit is a mix of an on site in person and a remote audit.
So, the main difference between a hybrid audit and a traditional audit is that part of the process is made remotely, basically. So, how does the nature of documentation submission and evidence review change with respect of hybrid audits?
Mm. Well, you see, the documentation in any company is really bespoke and unique. You do not have the same in two companies. And that means that an auditor will always have to ask for some explanation of the contents and understanding of what has been documented. Now, if you are on site, it is quite easy to just point to a passage within a document and you ask for some explanation. And but for the person reviewing documentation from remote, this is not so simple, obviously. And it means it's typically not sufficient to simply submit a document to the auditor, but you may also have to append some explanation as part of the submission.
I see. I see. And I also see why. So this is part of a broader move that is about. It's like happening in the whole industry, and it's not only pharmaceutical industry really, but if we talk about life science and pharmaceutical, it's happening a lot, which is digitalization basically of any kind of procedure. And I also see that a lot of these processes are linked very often linked to misconceptions. So if you were to identify the typical misconception about hybrid audit, what would that be?
Well, I think A key reason for these hybrid audits was, of course, the trigger we talked about, but instead of a traditional audit where you send someone to site, you want to have some cost savings. Fair enough. It's all the travel and accommodation costs and that. But although this is, of course, correct, this is in fact offset by the increased effort you have to put in to manage a hybrid audit. Yeah, because always the hybrid audit effort is higher than that for the traditional one. And so you need to be quite careful whether you are, in fact, having cost savings at the end.
I see. I see. And could you outline how companies should prepare for a hybrid inspection? Because the process is quite different from the traditional one, right? So I guess the preparation is also different.
Well, you're absolutely right. And this was one of the key issues in the beginning when these hybrid audits were performed initially,
Yeah, I can
because they
bet.
hadn't been proceduralized. Yeah. You really need to have the procedures. And that doesn't just mean the SOPs in place, but also the technology. Yeah, you need to be able to transfer sometimes rather large files, data packages between sites, between the auditor and the auditees, and that is one thing. But also the persons using that need to have the respective training to know how to use the technology, how to transfer in a secure manner, for example.
I see. And now that we're talking about technology, another big issue for her with digitalization is technology availability. So, what type of technologies and digital tools do you recommend to be used for remote inspection?
Mm. Well, particularly if you want to show via video link your operations, you do need to have good signal and bandwidth. Something that is often encountered in just a normal Zoom meeting, even. But you also need to have the right cameras and you need to have the right experience how to handle these cameras. I've seen people using their mobile phones. Apart from awfully wobbly footage, there is often a lack of focus, and the person recording the video doesn't actually see what the auditor sees. So, really, instead of a mobile phone, you need to have something like a headset camera, and I've seen some working very, very well in these circumstances.
Well, I guess it seems fairly obvious when you say it out loud. You say, hey, you need a good connection and you need a laptop, to run all these audits. But in fact, it's not, right? Because not all the companies are ready to handle that internally. So it's part of the preparation.
Indeed. And you see, in many countries, we also have these privacy laws that
Oh yeah,
do not allow video capture of persons without their consent. So you can't just walk, say, through a laboratory and show everyone's face to the remote auditors. Whereas if
yeah.
you're there in person, you can walk through and you see for yourself. Nothing prevents you from doing that. So what that means is the internal audit programs in these companies need to verify that A, the needs of the auditors are covered, and but on the other hand, the privacy requirements aren't violated.
I see. I see. And now that so you said that the companies have to update their internal audits procedure, basically. So what's the typical mistake that you encountered like the most in companies?
Well, of course, many companies nowadays have very good technology, but what I mentioned before is not many documents are self-explanatory. And if the auditor needs particular information that is on page, I don't know, 39 of 60 or so of a document, So what companies tend to do erroneously is to send the whole document instead of
Mm.
just send this particular page or point out in annotation. It is on this particular page in this particular paragraph, and this is where you find what you're looking for.
Just to speed up the process, basically. And
Yes.
from the perspective of institutes, so basically FDA, EMA, MHRA, various global say government agencies or whatever. What is the difference in inspection approach, or at least the expectations? I mean, between a regular audit and a hybrid audit.
So in principle, any type of audit, including the hybrid audits, are accepted by the regulators these days,
Okay.
provided, of course, the companies have proceduralized these. However, some agencies, for example, in the European Union, they demand specific on-site in-person audits for critical operations, such as, say, aseptic manufacturing. So because they say you can never fully get the picture if you're not there in person.
Yeah, I see. And apart from specific procedures that are strictly required to be done in person, for the remote part, have they become like more strict in terms of what you have to prove or the type of documents that you have to acquire, or is it basically the same?
I think it's basically the same. I really
Okay,
haven't seen much of a difference, really.
okay. So could you share an example of a successful hybrid audit that you've reported or witnesses or you just participated to, and highlight what made it really successful?
Yeah. So, well, I'm sorry to say, but I cannot recall an audit, a hybrid audit that I've been involved in that has ever been fully satisfactory.
Okay.
Uh, there, there were always technical challenges. Um, and it's not that they can't be overcome, but they were there. And that makes it slightly frustrating for the auditor.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a also this is fairly understandable when you say it out loud, right? It's a complex procedure, and it makes sense that sometimes you just encounter some kind of issues, and you can just overcome them from time to time. It's not like having a perfect procedure is kind of a complex task to accomplish, right? So if you were to find um, what would be the major setback for the hybrid audit in general? So what's the weakness part of this approach?
I think two things. One is how do you show a document?
Mm.
Say you're in a manufacturing environment and there's a logbook, and you want to show this logbook, and you want to show it without wobbling. You want to show it in a clear way, so you're not zooming in out all the time. That is a very complex thing. The other element that you cannot capture through a video link, for example, is how people behave, the
Mm.
body language. If I'm together with several people, I can look around and I can see them all and I can get an impression. That is not something you can normally do via video link. So, yes, in a hybrid audit, you have someone on site, but you also have the remote auditor. So they get two different pictures, really. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And does AI come in a picture? I mean, like machine learning algorithms might be of help in this matter, right? Is there anything that's already done with AI?
Well, I know that AI is being applied or tested in many different areas, but
Okay.
I suppose it's a bit early to say if this really will help in this particular field. It could, but we don't know yet.
Okay, I totally understand. So coming back to the double inspector, double auditor, sorry. You said you have a person who is physically present at the facility, and then you have a remote auditor who is connected through a webcam or something. So can we elaborate a little bit about the strategies to handle the real-time inspector requests during the hybrid inspection? Because I feel like if you have two people and you're basically at the same time talking to two different auditors, how do you handle this communication? Because it's more like a back and forth of questions, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think we have a lot of digital tools at our
Mhm.
disposal. And some companies are very good at testing them out and using them in this respect. But not every company is as advanced and is as inspection ready as others are. So perhaps this is what we have at the moment. There are lots of medium-sized small companies, and they have lots of other things to do, and inspections are more a hindrance or an interruption to the normal business than something that they want to focus on a lot. So, but still, the technique of not merely providing a document and say, here you go, read, try and understand, instead of providing annotations, providing guidance, what is in this document, what to focus on, that anyone can do. And it doesn't require a lot of effort to do that.
Yeah, and talking about this, as this is kind of so you picture this as um, an evolving situation. It's keep on evolving and changing in time because companies are starting to use more advanced technology. So now they have access to better tools and better softwares to help with the hybrid audits. So looking ahead a little bit, let's say 5 years from now, what major evolution do you see in regulatory inspection in general?
Well, the goal, in fact, for the companies and the inspectors is to have fewer and certainly more effective inspections and audits. And so these digital tools will definitely be great enablers. I mean, even hybrid audits, if you look back 10 years, they were almost unimaginable because the technology just wasn't there. And
Yeah.
now they are commonplace thanks to the advances in digital technology. So I think in 5 years we will see much smoother inspections in this hybrid way.
And if you were to give an advice, just one advice to QA managers in companies to get into this hybrid audit setups, what would that advice be?
Well, you always have to weigh up the pros and cons. And as I said before, no two companies are the same. So in some companies, it may be the absolute perfect tool to use, in others not. So what you need to do is you need to weigh up the pros and cons, as I said, but don't just base your decision on cost alone.
I see. I see. So, look, I wanted to bring up another topic because during our preliminary conversation, you brought up a very good uh, point, and it's something that never occurred to me. Honestly, I never heard about it. You outlined the risks very well, so I want to ask you some questions about it, and it's wood pellet contamination. So I would like you to introduce the uh, unseen risk that me myself, in the first place, never thought about, and why is that a practical risk and where that risk is.
So we talk about logistics, yeah, and the logistics business uses a lot of pallets, obviously, to transport goods. And so what we have is in the logistics environment, much of it is surprisingly unregulated. And so, especially when it comes to transportation of and storage of pharmaceuticals. So the contamination of the medicines in the supply chain is really typically caused by other goods that you transport together in the same vehicle or same container, but also from the wooden pallets it can come from that you transport the goods on.
What is the so we're talking about the wood pellet can contaminate the product, but what's the the actual contamination risk
Right.
with wood pellets?
Yeah, it's not the splinters. It's in fact. So the risk, you see, that wood can absorb things,
Yeah,
moisture, etc., and it could grow molds, for example. So the risk from untreated wooden pallets is there. You could have, as I said, fungi, pests, or insects even being boring into the wood, and so these could, if the wood stays untreated, then these insects, etc., or fungi could affect the goods that are stored on top of it. So this is one thing. But the other thing is also the non-segregation of goods. Yeah, so you may have pallets that are good and pallets that are not so good. So you don't want to have a mix-up of that in the same vehicle or container.
yeah, that makes total sense. So, what do you suggest for pharma companies in terms of checks or SOPs to be implemented to detect this, pallet related contamination, at least in a proactive way?
Yeah, so these these pellets to prevent any insects or molds or fungi or so growing on them are being treated.
Mhm.
And the best way to have them treated is to have them heat treated.
Right.
If they are heat treated, they are stamped with a specific stamp that the way they are being treated, etc. So what you want is you want in your operations prevention. You want to prevent any contamination. So you want to be sure that the right pallets are being used. Because once you have the contamination, there typically is no way to actually rescue your medication. And so you don't want to lose very valuable product. And that means what you need is staff who can recognize whether a pallet has been appropriately treated or not and can be used, therefore.
But how do you test it? I mean, we talked about the risk of having cross contamination basically between a properly treated pallet and a non-treated pallet. So even though you have the actual properly treated pallet, there's still a risk that this pallet is contaminated. So how do you test it? Do you run like surface contamination tests or something like that?
Well, in fact, the tests are very simple. There are two. Look with your eyes whether you see
Okay.
the actual stamp, and the other one is with your nose. Does it smell? If
Oh,
there is something wrong with it, it typically starts deteriorating and you would smell it. So, yes, it's just our senses that are being used. I have never seen any other test methods than that.
I
And
see.
they
I see.
work perfectly fine, in fact.
I see. I see. And is there any difference between the type of pharmaceutical that the pallet is carrying over, like solid dose against versus like injectables? Is there any difference, or is just contamination means contamination for everything?
Mm. Now, because sterile medicines are typically packed in glass vials or
Hmm.
glass containers, and there is a reduced risk of contamination, say, versus the solid dosage forms, which are in blisters or cartons. It's just a stronger barrier, but it doesn't mean it couldn't still get contaminated. So whether it's worthwhile differentiating, probably not. Because let's not forget, logistics is a fast moving business. Yeah.
Yeah, fair, fair. And does the FDA or like the EMA or all this kind of organizations come in a picture when it comes to pallets and logistics? I mean, are they doing something about this concern?
Well, so when we look, for example, at the US regulations, 21 CFR 21156C, for those interested, it requires written procedures for sanitation that is designed to prevent contamination of the equipment and the goods. So it doesn't specifically call out pallets. And there are other regulations, for example, for drug substance and the good manufacturing practice regulations for that. And again, it doesn't specifically call out pallets, but of course, anything that can cause a contamination needs to be prevented. So we need to take them into account. And of course, the
Okay,
regulations can't have a complete list of all the things that could cause a contamination.
I see, I see. And you have a real case, like a real world experience of a contamination that happened and it's connected to a wood pellet?
Well, I can't say for sure, but I haven't seen one. But then we also need to understand that the majority of citations are never made public.
Oh, look,
So yes, we hear of warning letters for its reason that, but that is a tiny, tiny fraction of all the inspections and the inspection observations that are being made globally. So it is quite possible. I just don't have a practical example to show you.
I see, I see. And what alternative materials would be possible to be used as an alternative to wood pellets? Like, could we use like metal or other kind of materials?
Well, you can, of course, use plastic and metal, and they are being used, but mostly within a manufacturing facility or a pharma warehouse. And in most cases, it is plastic pallets. I've seen both, but mostly plastic. Now, they have a higher cost and an additional weight compared with wood. And so for general transport, this is not really a choice. It is really if you have the environment for it as well. So don't just use a metal pallet next to the wooden pallet and so on, because it doesn't really make any difference. So the environment and the pallets, they go together.
So basically, there would be alternatives available on the market, but they're kind of a pain to implement, basically, because it's mostly more
It's
expensive and it's harder to.
Yeah, it's the logistics of using it in general transport would be too onerous.
Yeah,
It's just not practical.
I
It's
totally
not
see.
just costly, it's just not practical, really. Yeah.
I see. I see. So what should company do? Like, do they have any chance to integrate some risk management or anything, about the supply chain, in terms of, risk assessment? I don't know. Would they be able to do something about that?
Well, we need to see that the value of pharmaceuticals is phenomenal. Yeah. In fact, it's known that stealing and putting pharmaceuticals on the black market is more profitable than illegal drugs. So so the risk needs to be addressed, and companies do that. So they do perform the risk assessments, and as I said, there you want to prevent. And a lot of companies then go for bespoke supply logistics, that they say, for example, that pharmaceuticals can only be transported in a vehicle that only transports pharmaceuticals, that does not also transport food, or alternatively food or pharmaceuticals, and or goats or whatever. You just don't want to take the risk at all to have any contamination. So, as I said, it's the avoidance, the prevention. That is the key message here.
Yeah, yeah, makes total sense. And could technology come in a picture about this issue? Like, um, thinking a lot like blockchain, RFID, RT technologies, all this kind of stuff. Can they come in a picture to help out in this situation, just for the sake of tracking contaminated products or everything?
Well, they are used, but it's predominantly for just traceability. Where are my
Yeah,
goods? Nothing else, really, as far as I've seen. Yes.
yeah, just for in phase of a contamination, you have a better understanding and a better traceability on the specific product that has been exposed to that
Yes.
very
Yeah.
contamination.
Yeah.
I see. I see. So, do you see any change in the future of logistics or, in general, any initiative to handle these risks, or do you think it's just something that will stay there and will be progressively addressed through the current existing logistic companies?
What we see is a trend, especially by the logistics providers, to have more specific pharma focused services. That goes especially for air freight, um, road transport, perhaps less so for ocean freight, but the logistics for these pharmaceutical goods, because of the value, can also so it is viable to provide these specialized services rather than the generic ones. And we've seen several industry driven, sorry, we have seen several industry driven initiatives where, say, ports, logistics companies, hauliers, etc., come together and try to provide a standardized service. Because, as I mentioned previously, a lot of this industry is not regulated by, say, MHRA, FDA, etc. And therefore, the initiative needs to come from the industry rather than from the regulators to have a higher standard.
Yeah, I see. For sure, it's something that has to come from the inside. It's
Yes.
it's a movement that has to come from the inside. Yeah, makes sense. Well, thank you, Siegfried, for your precious insight. That was very informative. And thank you for your time and for coming up with Pharma now today.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me. And bye bye for now.